Good day, Internet. This is DTNS Live for Tuesday, April 1st. It's April Fool's Day, 2025. From Studio Animal House, I'm Sarah Lane.
From somewhere in Petaluma, I'm Jason Howell.
And no one's full. I'm the show's producer, Roger Chang.
You know, we're not going to lie to you on the show. We don't do that here
we
on
don't lie,
DTNS
but
Live.
we do make puns.
We pun. We definitely pun. But we don't lie.
From time to time. I've missed all of the April Fool's stuff so far, so I feel like I'm
see
like
any today.
somehow.
I mean, maybe I wasn't looking.
I wasn't looking.
Hard enough,
I have my theories on that, but I'll save it for another day.
Okay, save it for April 2nd. Daily Tech News Show Live is made possible by you, our listeners, and our viewers. Thanks to all of you, including Brandon Brooks, Johnny Hernandez, and High Tech Okie. And welcome everyone to DTNS Live, the show where we discuss the tech news to help us all understand it a little bit better. Jason Howell, you reminded me that you were with us back in January during CES. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, CES in the rear view. Since then, I went to Barcelona for Mobile World Congress.
Ooh,
I've been a traveling fool this year so far.
Did you have a lot of tapas?
Did you have mobile tapas?
You're going to hate me when I say this. I had a lot of tapas, and half of the time I was like, I really just want to eat something else. Tapas are great, but for whatever reason, I wasn't feeling it while I was in
You just wanted a side of cow.
Well,
I just wanted a hamburger.
Tapas can have cow, as part of the day. I know what you mean. Tapas sometimes can be like, it's small and confusing.
It's like they were all, every time there was tapas, it was like the little fried kind of finger food things, and it was all.
It's like hors
d'oeuvre. You just wanted a
you know?
burrito.
Yeah, totally. One of the nights, actually, when I was working in the hotel, I did DoorDash, and I got Five Guys. I was like, you know what? I just want a hamburger. So that's me.
You know, I mean, global economy. You can get Five Guys in Barcelona. What's not?
It's crazy, but it's true. Yeah.
Crazy but true. All right, we are actually here to talk about tech news. So let's go ahead and start out with the quick hits.
This company called OpenAI has closed a $40 billion funding round. Kind of a big deal, valuing the company at $300 billion. It's a funding record. SoftBank led the investment, while Microsoft and other backers contributed the rest. The deal hinges on OpenAI restructuring into a for-profit entity by year end, and the company plans to use the funds to expand AI research and infrastructure. And in other OpenAI news, there's a bunch actually, its new image generator powered by GPT-4o is now available for all users, with free tier users on a daily limit.
Well, I reached my limit today. Gave me 3. Gave me 3
quick.
as a free user. But it's OpenAI. We'll talk about this a little bit later in the show. But yes, in the news in a big way. But Microsoft also in the news for expanding Copilot Plus PC features to Intel and AMD powered devices, formerly exclusive to Snapdragon chips. Features like live captions, co-creator, restyle image, and image creator will now be available across more Copilot Plus PCs. Some features like semantic search and voice access will still launch on Snapdragon devices first.
AI fragmentation continues. Intel's CEO Lip-Bu announced plans to spin off non-core assets without saying which divisions would be affected. He also said Intel will launch new products like custom semiconductors, but dismissed recent speculation about breaking up the company. Tan took over as CEO on March 18th, following Pat Gelsinger's departure in December.
Xiaomi says it's cooperating with police after a fatal crash involving its SU7 EV's autonomous driving feature killed 3 people in China. The accident occurred while the driver assistance system was engaged, and Xiaomi says that the system alerted the driver to take control 2 seconds before the crash. The company has submitted driving data to authorities and pledged transparency.
The standalone Zelle app is shutting down. That's kind of crazy. Zelle says only 2% of transactions happen within the standalone app. Okay, now it makes sense. Users can continue sending money through their bank's Zelle integration or switch to alternatives like Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, and Apple Wallet for domestic transfers, or Remitly and Western Union for international ones.
Google is rolling out a beta update for Gmail so that enterprise users can send encrypted emails more easily without requiring special software or certificate exchanges. Non-Gmail recipients can also access encrypted messages using a guest Google Workspace account. The feature isn't true E2E, since administrators can manage encryption keys and user access, but will initially be available within orgs and will expand to all email providers later this year. All right, everybody, let's talk home theater, shall we?
Let's do it.
This one caught my eye. Samsung's new $1,800 HWQ99F soundbar system includes not just the soundbar, but a subwoofer and 2 rear speakers, compatible with Dolby Atmos, DTS-X, and Samsung's Eclipse audio. 23 speakers in total in this array, an improved voice amplifier, and integrates with Amazon's Assistant or AirPlay and also Google Home. It also supports eARC and HDMI 2.1, which is optimized for Samsung TVs and gaming. And you might say, well, I don't have a Samsung TV. I don't either. Well, I actually do in my bedroom, but it's old and, going the way of the dodo. But in my living room, I have an LG TV. This is compatible with my setup, and I don't have one now. I used to have a sound bar. It just, I don't know. I've moved too many times. It just never made it to the current apartment that I live in. But I've been thinking about this for a while. It's like, do I go Sonos? Because I'm kind of a Sonos person. I've got Sonos speakers around my house, and do I really care about a subwoofer? Yes, the answer is yes. And do I do like a 5.1? Maybe not. Maybe you just do, soundbar sub and a couple speakers in the back and call it a day.
Oh, go ahead.
I didn't. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, so I have a soundbar system that's similar to this in our living room. It's not a Samsung soundbar, but I think it's like a Vizio, if I'm not mistaken. Got it from Costco a number of years ago. And for our living room, like when you're talking about having the center channel and the wides, given that the soundbar is wide enough, and I don't actually know the kind of specs on this, but I imagine it's probably similar to the size that we have in our living room. The way the configuration of the living room, it actually works really well because I think that the knock on this, if I was to look at it prior to buying it, I actually thought this is like, yeah, but those front speakers, you can't get them far enough away to get the true separation. And you might be able to get better separation by doing that. But I've been reasonably happy, if that isn't a shining endorsement.
This is one of those things where companies need to straddle the line between experience versus convenience, right? Because when you have true discrete audio, I used to have like a 5.1 setup, but I will tell you, when you have kids, it's sort of a pain in the butt because you have to worry about errant cables running around no matter how you direct them under your sofa, around pieces of furniture. It can be hazardous. And so by kind of combining the front three, right, you combine your center channel with your stereo left and right into a sound bar, you simplify that setup, and then you have wireless surrounds in the back. And you're hoping that you have enough speakers in the sound bar sense of Dolby Atmos, if not maybe the ideal or the kind of standard bearer Atmos experience, because a lot of people live in either small apartments or they live in living rooms that are often cluttered with other things, and so you have to make this trade-off. And you see a lot of this. It's weird because when I was looking for surround sound stuff within the past couple of years, outside of going just DIY, picking out your speakers, picking out your surrounds, picking out your surround sound receiver, which adds not just a level of cost, is where do I put this, right? My living room's already starved of space. Now I got to find space for this giant brick of equipment. And for a lot of people, it's like, yeah, I put this here, I put this there, turn it on. If it's 85% of the way there, I'm happy.
And some of this is cosmetic, right? It's like, if you want some, back in the day, I used to rock some Bowers and Wilkins speakers. They're like, tower speakers, on either side of the TV. That was like a piece of art to me. And they were lovely. I ended up moving to an apartment where they didn't fit anymore. So I, sold them to a friend, at a deep discount. Hope he still is happy about that. But yeah, it was kind of like, do I really care about this? Not in a tiny little living room where I'm enclosed anyway. I think that the whole audio and kind of home theater experience, it's very subjective. Some people just do not care. They're like, if I can hear dialogue, that's,
I've resigned myself to that at this point, at this stage of my life.
And other people really want to figure out, like, what can we do with this room? But it really does depend on, what that room is. And like how much space you have.
If you have the space and you have the extra money to go with it, you're going to build yourself maybe convert your garage into a home theater set up with speakers, installed into the ceiling, into the side. You can do new sheetrock and everything. But most people don't have that luxury. My living room has a vaulted ceiling. Atmos is not going to go anywhere in any setup unless I actually mount speakers above my head. So I've resigned myself. Best I'm going to get is maybe stereo, maybe 3.1 at best at this stage, because putting satellite speakers behind me is a little dangerous with kids constantly running in and out. Yeah. The one thing I will not give up is a subwoofer, and one thing that bugs me to no end is that the subwoofer pre-out on a lot of sound bars is just is a relic of history. It's not a thing they introduce anymore. A lot of the subwoofers they have are wireless, and they use proprietary wireless signals in order to drive those subwoofers. It'd be great if I could buy like a SVS, or I can buy like a Polk or some other third party subwoofer, and I just put it there and connected wirelessly, but not having to be in the Samsung ecosphere in order to do it, because I want my lower than 30 hertz rumble, when King Kong comes out of the ground and starts punching, Godzilla in the face.
Heck yes, you do.
The subwoofer thing is also, it really depends on, we're talking about living room setups or, wherever you're watching TV. But the subwoofer specifically is, if you are an apartment dweller, as I am, and you live on the top floor, as I do, you're going to make enemies with your downstairs neighbor if your subwoofer is too cool.
No,
now, I want it to just rumble through my chest. But downstairs neighbors in the past, I don't currently have a subwoofer, so it's not an issue. But in the past, we're like, you need to turn the volume down. I'm like, it's not the volume.
No, you're listening to my music, folks. All of you. Except for Unit 1 all the way at the basement. But
yeah, the system that we have,
how old is your building, and yada yada yada. I mean, Roger, you don't have anybody living in your basement, I don't think.
I don't have a basement, so it's great.
So there you go. Subwoofer works well, but you have to take all that stuff into consideration.
And that's one of the appeals of a lot of these Dolby Atmos headsets. Right, is like I have headphones and I can compass myself reasonably well with the experience, but I'm not annoying the neighbor. I'm not annoying my spouse. I can watch in the middle of the night and not wake up the kids. There's a lot of these things that you need to weigh, and I'm actually kind of glad that there are products that sort of fill those different situations.
Yeah. I have a subwoofer. I have a satellite subwoofer connected to ours that goes behind the couch, and then the rear speakers kind of are wired behind the couch onto the wall from there. I would say the one annoyance that I have, and maybe it's just my system in general, is that occasionally the wireless connection from the subwoofer behind me to the soundbar at the other end of the room for whatever reason, it loses connection. And it's probably a symptom or an issue of our soundbar that we've now had for quite a few years, but certainly something to consider. When things aren't totally wired down, you lose a little bit of that kind of consistency, and that's something to keep in mind as well.
Especially, and this is the one issue, not that I have issues with wireless subwoofers, but of all the loudspeakers, that's the ones that's going to shake the most and probably shake the internal circuitry of whatever wireless system they use. And it's a thing that exists for everything, whether it's a Samsung, whether it's an LG, whether it's Klipsch. Everyone has issues with wireless subwoofers.
Yeah, I mean, and to go back to Samsung's price, $1,800 is like, ooh, that sounds expensive. But again, you've got your sound bar, assuming that it's a great one. You've got your sub. You got your 2 rear speakers. You can do that setup for less than this, for sure. But but if it's a good one, it's an all-in-one solution.
Indeed.
All right, let's talk about AI. We can't really get away from it, everybody. So we're just gonna do it. We're just gonna lean into AI. The Financial Times reports that Google's DeepMind is slowing its publishing of research to keep its competitive edge in the AI industry. Google has implemented a 6-month embargo on strategic papers and will require multiple approvals before publication. Some former staff say, well, the shift prioritizes commercialization over open research and has contributed to at least some employee departures. I don't think anybody's right or wrong here, but yes, I think we're seeing a lot of these kinds of shifts because we have so much competition. Jason, I know you have thoughts on this.
Well, yeah, and it's really hard to dive into thoughts on this and not dive into the topic that we have coming up from this, but I'll do my best to try. But I think DeepMind's they've done a lot of work in the research aspect of AI and where we are now. They've got, Demis Hassabis. I always slaughter his name, so apologies, Demis or Demi. Whenever I get to talk to you, I'll give you my apology in person. But they've got some really incredible minds working on AI, and from the research perspective, it's got to be hard to be working on a project like this for as long as they have and dedicated to the furtherment of this, rapidly growing and expanding technology that is artificial intelligence, and doing some of the really cool things that they are doing, and then kind of hit a point to where it's like, no, you know what? Now we're going to go a little bit more closed off. We're going to go a little bit even further towards the commercialization aspect. At the end of the day, you're working for Alphabet, so any thoughts or expectations that the work that you're doing couldn't at some point kind of be de-emphasizing the greater good aspect and more for driving the revenue and the money that the company's making. Like, that's always a threat, and that's always residing on the edge. And that's kind of what we're seeing here. It's just got to be kind of a challenge to be a researcher and be in an organization like this, and then suddenly see things change like that.
Well, and I think that it would be easy to take the story as, now the companies are, it's trade secrets. And
yeah,
I mean, there's probably some of that going on.
For sure.
But yeah, just to be like, we want to, in the case of DeepMind over at Google, and researchers working on projects, we want to make sure that, it's ours. We are the researchers. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that I don't know. I mean, if there was some legality issue of doing that, then it would be like, okay, well, then we talk about legal things. But this is what happens when, companies are kind of racing to the finish line, as it were.
This is the thing. It's a company, right? It is a for-profit company. That's not an academic institution. I mean, even academic arenas like Stanford do research for money, and so there probably is. And I think part of it is that I also think is they don't want to waste R&D time collating and getting information together for a paper when they want to see quicker results, or at least a quicker turnaround time on some of the stuff that they have been developing into something that is more commercially viable. great that you understand the underpinning technologies of whatever large language model you're developing, but also how can we turn this into a product quick enough so we can compete with the Anthropics, the OpenAIs, because it is a very, very fast-paced business, and any time that you don't dedicate toward, turning around at least to an investment, a money-making product means, less interest from investors. So you got to keep churning, and maybe in some way this kills two birds with one stone. You don't accidentally let out trade secrets, but more importantly, you keep all your R&D folks focused on what you want them focused on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's an interesting kind of turn or about face too when we think about kind of Google's history and relationship with artificial intelligence. It was 2017 that the Google researchers did the Transformers paper that largely is driving a lot of what we're seeing and have seen for the past 2.5 years. And, the realm of AI was one of those things. I remember just a couple of years ago when OpenAI kind of burst onto the scene and we started to see all this rapid development. I remember reading and hearing why isn't this Google? Why is this some unknown that came out? Because Google was there much earlier than anyone else. And so this is, largely this is an opportunity for Google to say one of our strongest assets in arguably one of the most important technology advancements of the current age of computing. It's time for us to benefit more than anyone else off of this arm, because they are doing some really cool things. Their DeepMind was behind Project Astra, and we have yet to see a commercial product there, but that's their wearable glasses technology that's really really impressive. I think honestly, when that gets released, people are going to be really floored with what they see. And so, why not? This is your asset at a time when this particular type of technology and technology production is more important than almost all things in computing right now. At least companies believe that, and so does Google.
It's going to change a lot of lives, that's for sure. And it's funny you mentioned this, Jason, because a lot of people sort of go like, OpenAI came out of nowhere and just blindsided all these other companies. It's like, no, the other companies were doing research behind the scenes. It's just that once OpenAI started to get traction, it's kind of like when you talk about video chats and you use the word Zoom. It's like, but there are lots of other companies. It's just that Zoom just kind of got ahead and became
OpenAI productized a lot earlier
exactly.
than everybody else.
So now it's sort of like, can Google catch up? It's like, probably, yes. Probably.
And this is a thing. I think this is more implicitly a judgment on where Google thinks it finds itself in this space, right? Like when they were the biggest fish in the sea, so to speak, they were a little less reluctant and recalcitrant about publishing this stuff because, like, hey, we're doing science. These are Halo projects. This is the stuff that burnishes the credentials of Alphabet of Google. But as you see with this, and as you see in the marketplace, a lot of the competitors are not just bypassing Google, but in some cases lapping them. That company is under tremendous pressure to perform in that space specifically. And I think this is just more evidence of just having them. Okay, like let's all start focusing on this. Let us not get too distracted from doing some of these academic papers or any of these, because it takes up time, it takes up resources. And as what Sarah was saying, as quickly as this marketplace is evolving and changing and iterating, Google cannot afford to be seen as not just being behind, but just a complete laggard in that space. And I think that's that's how I see it.
Yeah. At the end of the day, how can we benefit more than anyone else from the work that we're doing here? And that's what this move is about, in my opinion.
Well, if you have thoughts, and I know you do, you can join the conversation in our Discord, which you can join by linking to a Patreon account at patreon.com/DTNS. All right, Jason Howell. We sometimes we say maybe there will be a show without a lot of AI going on, but that's not the world we live in. It's not the world we live in. So,
indeed, it's not.
OpenAI, going back to OpenAI, plans to release an open weight language model in the coming months, according to feedback forum on its website, which would be the company's first open language model since the release of GPT-2. You have been following this development really closely. So let's talk about what an open language model is and its importance in the LLM space, because I'm not sure everybody knows the difference.
Yeah, and I will just preface that, so in another podcast that I do called AI Inside, and when we started it with Jeff Jarvis and I, we started it because we didn't know a lot about AI, and we figured the best way to learn is to talk about it each and every week. And so this idea, this concept of closed AI models versus open weight models versus open source models, sometimes I feel like, myself included, but people can get a little confused as far as what this means and conflate open weight with open source. And they are actually very different things. But this is essentially OpenAI saying, hey, we've seen competitors like Meta. Meta is one of the prime examples of competitors with their Llama AI model that is open weight, and that affords certain host of opportunities for people who use it, or developers, researchers, that sort of stuff. And I just kind of thought that this would be a cool opportunity to kind of break apart what that actually means. And then why is that something that OpenAI wants compared to their closed source approach that we've really seen them benefit a lot from, right? They GPT-4, and then other competitors like Claude 3, Gemini, a lot of the big models that we're used to seeing, those are closed AI models. You don't have access to any of the development or any tweaking or modification, the weights, the parameters, the code, the training data, all that is closed off. And often it's just kind of hanging out in the cloud, running off of their servers. What OpenAI is talking about here is open weight models, which is not the same as open source, but this is very similar to what Meta has with Llama, with Mistral 7B, that sort of stuff, where the weights and the parameters themselves are available for download. And so you can kind of work with those. It also enables kind of more of a locally run approach, which is great for certain industries, things like healthcare, banking, because they can adjust those weights even though they don't have access to things like the code and the training data that's still closed off and proprietary. Not having access to those things, they don't have to send all that private data and that private information that they want to keep locked down and control through to the APIs that exist out on the cloud. And that's what OpenAI is talking about here. It's not really open source. I always like to refer to it as open-ish. It's it's open-er than not, but it's not open.
Well, because everybody wins, right? In a perfect world, an open weight model that is, let's say it comes from OpenAI, and a variety of healthcare centers end up using it, and feel really confident that it's a great model. It's everybody wins in that situation, and OpenAI gets a lot of on the ground information from folks who are using the model, which then makes the model even smarter.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big part of the open weight model approach, or the open source model approach, is the kind of rapid increase in the potential of development around it. It can really speed things up, because what you're talking about, what you're alluding to, is kind of more of an involvement of the community, and not just the people that work at OpenAI creating this, which obviously they're very smart people. They've created, created incredible things, and they're securing historic funding rounds as a result of it. But the more open-ish approach does involve more people, very similar to the open source community when we're talking about coding just in general, not AI specific. When you're talking open source models, things like DeepSeek, Mistral, Nemo, that's like a whole other level, and that's where you start getting into the very community driven models, like entirely transparent, entirely replicable. But then you also start to go into kind of what some people would say the dangerous territory, right? Like, oh, well, then your controls are completely lost for the most part. So, you've got higher potential for things like disinformation distribution or non-consensual deep fakes or automated cyber attacks. It's open for all, and that means open for all. And that has its downsides too.
And that's because nobody is held accountable if that happens.
Well, it's because open is open. So with open weight models, if I'm a developer, I've got access to get in there and play around with the weight, kind of the contextual side of things. But when it comes to the actual training data that was used to create that model, I have no influence over that whatsoever. That's all proprietary. With open source, it's truly open. It's kind of like open source software. It's very much like open source software in the sense that almost everything there is accessible, replicable, modifiable, inspectable, so other people can take a look. And that means that, people with good intentions, also people with bad intentions, can go in there and take their own copy, their own version of that, and use it for whatever they want. And that's kind of the challenge that open source models bring with them.
So what's the benefit for the company to an open weight model? Does it help development of that model? Does it help them market it? Does it, in what way are they gaining an advantage other than just having a closed model and an open source model?
Well, imagine you.
Yeah. Okay. Go for it. No. Go, Sarah.
I will say this and then leapfrog it over to you. Imagine if you were trying to figure out an open weight model that would be great for the healthcare industry. But it's like, well, we don't work in healthcare, but we think it's going to be great. It's like you need a bunch of people in healthcare to try it out and then circle back, and then everybody wins.
But couldn't you do that with a closed AI model as well? And
You could, but that might be cost prohibitive, depending on the situation.
Yeah, I mean, a model like GPT, ChatGPT, whatever number you want to throw out there, is created, like a lot of those models are created to be everything machines. Really good at all, pretty good at all things for the most part, right? When you get into, at least my understanding, when you get into things like open weight models and open source models, you start to get into the realm of really being able to be very specific about what this particular model is for. So when you're talking healthcare, when you're talking banking, an open weight model could be just really tailored to that specific thing. All other things be damned, because they don't matter as much. And like I said, there's also kind of the security aspect of this too. If I'm running models like, OpenAI has said, that, at least I believe they said this, I know I put it down in my notes, that this is going to be enabled for running on your own machine. And that's going to give certain businesses, certain industries a little bit more confidence in the models that they are using, because they aren't comfortable sending that HIPAA, protected information through the cloud into an API on somebody else's servers. Like, it becomes a little bit more controllable. And I think to answer your question, Roger, is, speeding up the development because of the community involvement. That's a really big advantage. I think OpenAI wants to be there because the DeepSeek thing kind of happened, and DeepSeek is a really good kind of example of the power and the kind of impact, at least right now, that open-er or open-ish models have on AI development. And companies like Meta and DeepSeek, they're showing that there's interest. They're showing that there's there. And so I think OpenAI wants to be sure that if we are, the shining example of everything AI, they want to be sure that they're there too and aren't missing out on some sort of development. So
sometimes I think about, okay, we're talking about so much of this stuff over the last, let's call it 2 years, at least in the public opinion, has come out of nowhere. And it's sort of like, are the kids in schools still going to learn? Is this good for companies? Is everyone going to get laid off? So much sort of FUD questions are happening with this. At the same time, this is not going away. In 5 to 10 years from now, I wonder if we'll look back on this time of like what chaos that was because we just didn't get it yet.
Yeah, well, what does it develop into? I mean, when you think about the fact that it's only been 2.25 years, and just to see the advancements that we've seen in such a short amount of time, yeah, it's kind of mind-boggling. That's why the big investment that we talked about earlier into OpenAI, the record-breaking investment, like what is a company that exists right now that we could say with any sort of certainty, oh, that's a company that could do what OpenAI just did? Like I couldn't point to any company other than.
But there are
where
many
OpenAI is
companies
right
who
now.
are doing similar things.
I
do think that OpenAI just got there first. So
got there.
It's
Absolutely.
like,
I totally
it's
agree.
like the Kleenex of AI. It's like we know that brand. That's OpenAI. Yay, ChatGPT. Yeah, we know how to use that. I mean, ChatGPT isn't the greatest for lots of things.
Yeah.
There are lots more options depending on what you're looking for. And not everybody has the time or even the interest really to be like, all right, well, let me use this query using 5 different models and figure out what's the best one for me. It's like you just do the one that it's the one that you know.
Yep, I totally agree. It's super true.
All right, well, let's switch gears. We're talking about movie theaters and studios who make movies that end up in movie theaters having a rough time of late. We really haven't bounced back from the pandemic. We had actor and writer strikes, where a lot of people in the entertainment industry work, plus the shift out of viewing habits from cinemas to home streaming, because there are way easier ways now to just kind of be hanging out on the couch and not have to, spend $40 giving your kids popcorn when you go to the cinema. But big tech might be coming to the rescue. So, Roger, what's the latest?
So at the most recent South by Southwest a few weeks back, Courtney Valente, head of film and streaming and theatrical at Amazon MGM Studios, said that the studio would release around 12 to 14 films in theaters in 2026 and potentially 16 films in the following 2027 year. Now, most of these films will spend around, or at least around 45 days in theaters exclusively before being available as pay-per-view or streaming on Prime Video. Now, this is a bit of a shift for Amazon because, as with other streaming players like Netflix and Apple, that window was never like fixed in stone. Like it will never ever switch. We'll never ever move it from theaters to streaming before this date. They did it for a couple of films, but just not as a rule. And so Amazon is sort of re-embracing sort of that theatrical showing exclusivity. Now this might be due in part to their recent acquisition of MGM. But my question to the both of you, I mean, does this really move the needle all that much in trying to get people back into this away from streaming and into the theaters, like basically butts and seats? And is this something that is much bigger than just an exclusivity window and having things in the theaters first, and more just as sort of an atomization of entertainment and the way that people watch? Because there are, I mean, if you take away all the non-streaming or just viewing content available and you just focused exclusively on shows, movies, and stuff, there's so much to watch. And cultivating that audience to go see a tentpole movie, whether it's like Oppenheimer or Barbie or whatever, to kind of get them in that seat, it takes a lot more. It takes a lot more uniqueness than you say even 15 years ago, where you could have another in a litany of franchise movies, whether it's a Marvel movie, Star Wars movie, or whatever, to get people all to come. It just seems like this is just but one aspect of a very complicated situation, and I'm not sure if this is a first step or is this just merely bailing water out of a sinking rowboat.
That's a good question. I mean, going back to our, home theater conversation from a few minutes ago, it's like, if you've got a great home theater situation in your house, apartment, whatever, then the draw to go to the stalwart theater is less, because you're like, I'm comfy here, sounds great. We could, draw the shades, have some fun, make some popcorn. It's like going to the theater. And for a lot of people, the theater was just something that you couldn't go to for a long time. Even before that, expensive. Especially if you're going in, as a family type thing. And of course, there's, lots of markups like,
concession stands.
Yeah, all that stuff.
Big time.
You end up, it's you got to go there. You got to make sure you got the tickets. You might not even be at a theater where you can get your seats ahead of time. So there's that whole thing, and it's many of us are like, that's just how it goes at the movie theater. But many people are like, but that's because we didn't have the option to do anything else.
Well, and it's interesting because even at the height of home video rentals in the 90s, early 2000s, people still wanted to go to the theaters, the cinemas, because the viewing experience was markedly different, right? Yeah. It was, the picture's better. It's full, actually widescreen. You got a good sound system. But more importantly, it was something that you didn't have a lot of other competition that would take away from your attention. Yeah, you had video games, but you didn't have a full-on Fortnite, session that you needed to make your appointment. You didn't have everything else scheduled on a calendar, or like tonight I'm going to play Super Mario Brothers 2 and finish it because that's what I have scheduled on the calendar. It's like whenever you get to it. But with the cinema, it was a meeting point, right? It was a meeting point for people. So before social networks, you physically met people somewhere to meet up. It was either for dinner, either for a movie, or just to hang out. And typically,
dinner
it
and
would be
a movie.
dinner movie. Yeah,
I mean that's. And even the movie portion of it is, I've been to a lot of movie theaters in my life, and it's like sometimes someone's heckling near you, and you're like, God, it's like there's a whole thing about being in a big room with a bunch of other people who may not act exactly the way you want them to, that makes the movie going experience for me just like, ooh, who knows? Who knows what's going to happen?
I will say, when I saw like Avengers Endgame, it was actually nice to be in a theater because everyone oohed and awed and laughed.
Yeah, you want that.
You have that group feel. But when you do a more cerebral or a more pensive movie, not everyone's going to go, what if that was me, all together in a collective gasp in the theater. And I also think that, a lot of theaters over the years have stripped down a lot of that fun aspect to it, right? You have an element of, double dipping. I paid to go see a theater or a movie in a theater. Not only do you rake me over the coals on the popcorn, but when I sit down, I got to sit through 15 minutes of ads, advertorials, PSAs, and a bunch of other stuff for like the Cineplex before I even get to the trailers for the upcoming movies.
It's more of a commitment.
Yeah, a lot of that excitement.
Much more of a commitment.
I remember when I watched Clash of the Titans, man, like the original one, back in the early 80s, the first thing they showed was Ferdinand the Bull cartoon, and then they did their trailers, and then they did the movie. That now, like, it's just like ad. Even when you sit down and you play that little word games that they have on the screen, trivia games, they always slide in like a thing for an ad for, hey, when you're done, you want to go get some boba tea down at the end of the Cineplex over at the boba tea shop. So it just feels like I'm paying money and I'm still being sold things. Why is that? Like, is the $40 not enough?
I mean, remember when stadium seating was like a new thing? Like, ooh, if it's a new theater, you have stadium seating, and so you never
was a
have
draw
to
for a
think
while,
about
for sure.
like the person in front of you wearing like a weird hat, or like all the kids can see, And now it's like stadium seating plus like plushy seats. Sometimes, if you're lucky, it's like plushy seats, and you can do the foot thing. So you're literally like laying in bed, basically, and watching this movie. Now, I'm a huge fan of this, but I'm like, I could just do that at home.
Right,
like,
right. Or you know,
it
or
just,
the other one is the beer, beer and wine. It's like, oh, well, now you can buy beer and wine, which, for a long time you couldn't do that at most movie
that
theaters.
was
You
a
could
real
in some
novelty at one
special
point.
ones. But, again, it goes back to, okay, yeah, but if I'm at home, I could get a 6-pack of beer for the cost of one beer at the movie theater.
Right. My
Or,
couch is better
whatever.
than
It's
this
just
chair.
the economics are so out of scale. And I think, at least for me, I love going to the movie theaters. I used to work in a movie theater for a number of years. Like, I love the theater experience. Yet I find myself going less post-pandemic. And I think part of that is just there's so much offered now. The window of exclusivity is so short that there's no real reason, unless it's a real tentpole movie that, like, I went and saw the Dracula one. Nosferatu. I saw that in the theater. Like, there's certain movies that I'm like, I bet that would be a really great movie experience. But it's fewer and far between them now because we have so much access. It's so much less expensive. It's just a number of things. It's really hard to put that genie back in the bottle now that it's been so convenient and comfortable.
I think the last movie that I saw in the theater, I'm probably forgetting something, but that I can remember was Barbie. So a couple years ago. And yeah, like I went with, a girlfriend of mine and her daughter and then her niece. And I mean, the entire theater was not girls and women, but mostly. And people were dressed up. And I was like, this would not have, I don't even think I would have liked this movie if I just watched it on my couch. Like, it was fun. Mm-hmm. It was really fun. It was like going to a concert.
It was a cultural event, right?
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you're all going with these
not
same
every movie's going to
expectations.
hit you that way.
And I think moving forward, and one of the things at South by Southwest, or not South by Southwest CinemaCon, which is happening this week, one of the executives said is like it's really hard to make money, like the economics of the current way of producing movies and marketing the movies, and the rate of return on investment isn't there anymore. It's breaking down, and I'm wondering if this is due in no small part to all the things we've expressed, but also because people's tastes have changed, right? I remember going to the bowling alley was a very frequent event. Not so in 2025. Is it something that people do? Yes. Are there a lot fewer bowling lanes available? Yes, because tastes have changed. And I think what we're seeing is a shift in a public appetite for that sort of entertainment into something else.
Sirach 311, before we close up this topic, good point, says the main reason people used to go to the movie theaters was because that was the only way that you could get the movie that was first released to the theaters.
Yeah.
I mean, it's even, I mean, just, I don't know, going back a couple of years, it's like, yeah, you can get it on streaming eventually. And now we're in a space where it's like, you can get it streaming the same day.
But
you
not,
can go to the theater and have like way more fun. But are you going to?
But not even just streaming. They're giving streaming 4K HDR, right? For a lot of the Big Ten. So the experience is you're shrinking the experience between going to a cinema and the at home. If you have a 4K TV, even smaller, you need to have something else that pulls people in. If they did a dinner and a movie like night where you just go from one thing into another, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say, but I really feel that we have a social taste. There's a change in taste. It's there's an onset of this.
Indeed. Well, before we close out the show, let's check out the mailbag. Anand Jr. writes in on Patreon. Hi, Anand Jr. I remember having a couple COBOL classes in college. This is in reference to a conversation we had last Friday on the show. Anand Jr. says, the first major project of mine was when I worked for a hospital and changing their internal web training from a mass of one-off Perl scripts to a proper learning management system. I wrote in classic ASP VB script, which I was teaching myself as I went. The VB6 classes did help, though. He says that was nearly a year for one developer. Even with a crackerjack team of 10% programmers, I can't see it happening in a year much less 2 months. It doesn't help that people likely to be drafted for this kind of task seem more or less are we'll fix it as we go types. Better for certain types of startups, but not systems that need to be as reliable as the sunrise from release.
Very true, and I still think that that metaphor of trying to change a tire when the car's still moving applies, right? You have a lot riding on it, but you're trying to do that while everything's in motion. It's a very ambitious 2 months seems for time frame to move Social Security onto a new code base.
Well, and what's the term for like break things and find out? I don't know. I think
Move fast, break things.
Move fast, break things. Thank you, Jason.
The Zuckerberg,
where
adage.
it's like, sort of like, okay.
Axiom.
I mean, sometimes that is the way to do it, but often not. Also, not the way to do it. That just gets really willy-nilly for a lot of
different
folks
different
who are,
situations demand different approaches, and
Indeed,
if you try to do everything with the same approach, it'd be like trying to build a house with just a screwdriver, right? Not happening. So I'm curious to see.
Although
how
that
this
would be
turns
an
out.
interesting challenge.
It would
see
be
that
a challenge,
being
but
a
if
good
you
YouTube video,
it's going to take you more than 2 months.
Yeah, well, it
what
might
it's gonna
take you more
do.
than a year because if you need to live in it, and that's all you got, I don't know how you're going to manage that.
Well, listen, if you have any feedback on anything we talk about on this show, anything you'd like us to talk about on a future episode, send it our way. We love to get your feedback. You make our show stronger. Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com. Jason Howell, such a pleasure as always.
Thank
and
you.
we you've been doing really good stuff on DTNS briefing. Let folks know where they
fun.
can keep up with the rest of your work.
Yeah, I love working on that show and getting the opportunity to work with you guys. So thank you for having me on. AndroidFaithful.com is probably the it's certainly within the DTNS wheelhouse, and we're having a lot of fun with that. The Android Faithful team. And then if you want to find me, just go to YouTube and search for Jason Howell. You'll find me. It's at Jason Howell on YouTube. I have a cool review I did out in the mountains of Sonoma County in the vineyards of Sonoma. A review of the Nothing Phone 3A. That's my latest.
Which mountains were those, Jason?
Well, near here, probably about 20 minutes from here. I can't even remember where it was. I just
Like
drove around until I saw a
Grove type
sign, and I
thing?
was like, I'm going to go over there.
Just
That's probably got
whenever
some
someone
cool
says
stuff.
Sonoma County, I'm like, one of me.
Yeah.
Where were you?
Yeah, it was fun. It's cool. I want to do more of that. Any chance to get out of the studio and out into the beauty, that's my goal.
Oh, I hear that. All right. Well, Roger, and thank you again, Jason. Roger,
Thank you.
we have quite a few submissions for show titles today. So what do we have?
Yeah, we have a lot of really funny ones. At the top, we have The Neighbors Are Listening for G. James B. In other news, AI keeps happening from Stealth Dave. Sound takes up space from GPEG84. Openish from Stealth Dave. I've been to a lot of movies from Stealth Dave, but we also had... So that's why I can't get my theater-only release movie about bowling alleys greenlit from Batfink 2001. Really funny, but a little too long for the show. And
It's still
the,
funny.
Yes, it is. And the Sonic Frontier from Stealth Dave, and GPEG84 with Movies Attack Your Wallet. Who did we end up going with, Sarah?
Well, even though I will give a round of applause to Stealth Dave for Openish, because that's a good one, we went with G. James B's The Neighbors Are Listening.
It's true.
Because
I
they
mean,
are.
I lived in a row
And
house.
sometimes if they live under you and you have a subwoofer, they're listening not in a good way.
No.
Oh man, I had a neighbor. This is back in San Francisco years ago, and it was like a loft building, and cool building. It was a great apartment, but I had somebody under me, and she just could not handle it. Where like I would like turn it down, where I'm like, it's really not that subby anymore, and she's like, no, I can still hear it.
I can hear. Even
Yeah.
the faintest amount
There
is too
is
much.
sort of a there's sort of a reverberation that occurs in certain spaces because it's like you're inside a
And
physical
I
residence.
never want to be that person who's like, I don't care, who cares if you want to sleep? It's like, no, I do care, but I'm like, I don't know what to do. It's a subwoofer. You have to put it on the floor.
You need to go buy your neighbor some cotton balls so they can wedge it in their ears.
All you got to do is wear earplugs. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, they need to subsume
I wear
their
earplugs
needs
every
to
night
your
just
to your
for
movie
fun.
night.
I don't even
It's
live in a loud neighborhood. They just
There-
feel nice,
there
It's
are a
time to
lot
go
of-
night-night.
there's a lot of home theater products that are really awesome, but really only make sense if you live in your own or
Yeah.
you live in a home that's detached, right? Like even if you live in a townhouse, if you've ever seen how townhouses are built, the walls that separate the two houses not that thick, and sound does travel very a lot. So it's tough unless you do unless they start building home theater grade row homes where you can just have everything insulated in between
Home
houses.
theater grade row homes. Yeah, I won't hold my breath for that.
That's the new trend. Yeah.
Don't say never.
It's funny
happen.
my current apartment, which is a railroad style, meaning kind of like it's
There's a train
thin
that goes
and
through it?
long. Yeah,
Oh.
like one room after another. There actually aren't railroad tracks in my apartment, but we call them railroad apartments.
Choo-choo.
But it's hard to explain. But there's really on the other side where the other people have the exact same mirror image apartment to me. We actually don't share a lot of walls, but we do in the bathroom. And we just do.
Just be careful on the spicy nights or something.
Well, I mean, it's never gotten that weird, but it's like,
That weird.
if someone's listening to a podcast while taking a shower in their bathroom, I know it because I can hear it.
Do they do any of those? What do they call it? Not the murder mysteries, like the podcast, true crime.
You can't hear the details. All you can
No,
hear because at first
Oh.
I was like, who is giving a speech and there are
all the
bathroom right
audible
now? No, it's
audible
just
ads
a
I get on
podcast.
YouTube portray people soaking in the tub as listening exclusively to true crime, detective, something where they have to
I
ponder
mean, it's
the
possible
mysteries while
that's
they're.
what's going on. I don't know.
I was
haven't
kind of
asked.
hoping you'd be in your bathroom and you'd hear something like through the
it'd
walls,
be
and you'd be like,
DTNS.
oh, wait a minute.
Oh, I
Yeah,
thought he was doing a
DTNS.
Seinfeld.
No, he's doing the DTNS thing.
Yeah, that would be cool. That would be
Yeah.
cool. And it's
Yeah.
not that it's not happening. I just, I don't know. But
You
all
just
I'm
never
saying
know.
is sometimes walls are thin where you're like, oh, I think I know who's in their bathroom. Okay, bye. Don't
Yeah.
want to do it. All right. So, Roger, before we get out of here today, do we have anybody to thank?
Yes, we have everyone in our Twitch chat for supporting us today. We got C-Spawn cheered us on with 200 bits. Zoe brings bacon cheering us with bits as always.
Yay.
Tom Merritt says go Cubs. He cheered us
Okay.
on with 4,000 bits. Stay on your vacation. PC Milesy cheered us on with 10 bits. And Zoe brings bacon cheered us on with bits yesterday. So, and then Tom Merritt says go Cubs. Resubscribe for 68 months at tier 3.
Oh, I'm one of our patrons. I don't really know what that does for me, but it's like, you know what? We just, circle of life.
I
right?
will say every
Circle
time
of life.
I will say every time I see Tom's name right now, I think of either mochi, donburi, or sashimi because I'm really hungry.
Well, you should eat.
I should.
Yeah, sounds like
I should
you're
eat
hungry.
sushi, donburi, or some mochi.
Well, thanks to everyone who supports our show. We could not do it without you. We say this every day, but it's true. Thank you to one and all for all of your support. And by the way, if you happen to be a lover of Apple products or software services, or maybe even like a hater of Apple products, it's okay. Apple has a lot of power users, sometimes known as hipster users. But what about all of the rest of us. Every week, Eileen and I co-host Apple Vision Show to talk exactly this. What do we like? What do we not like? Does Apple's vision match with what we're looking for? Get subscribed now at applevisionshow.com. And this Thursday, when we record our next episode, you might hear an interesting and familiar voice. That's all I'm going to say about that. You can watch our show live. DTNS Live is live Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern. That is 2000 UTC. And you can find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live. We're back doing it all again tomorrow with Scott Johnson talking about Nintendo Switch 2. It's a big announcement. Talk to you then.
The DTNS family of podcasts, helping each other understand.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.